Hello everyone, it's me Clayton. I just finished watching Firestarter, starring Zac Efron and directed by Keith Thomas, and with a score by legendary director John Carpenter. Now, John Carpenter is a legendary director when it comes to horror films, especially with his creation of the Halloween franchise. Unfortunately, he's only doing the score for this one, and while this film happens to get the musical score correctly, and while Zac Efron and the rest of the cast do a pretty decent job with the characters they're working with, the script ultimately gives them nothing to work with, as this ends up being the second bad film about Firestarter to taint the reputation of Stephen King adaptations. But let's get to the story, shall we? The story follows Andy, played by Zac Efron, and his wife Vicky, as they try to hide their daughter Charlie, played by Ryan Kiera Armstrong, from a shadowy organization that's trying to capture Charlie so they can use her power to create fire for their own nefarious purposes. This power, which in true Stephen King fashion, is controlled by her negative emotions, particularly anger and frustration. Basically they're trying to use Charlie's power for their own nefarious purposes, and Charlie has to run away from them, while also running away from an assassin who's sent to take out the entire family and also to capture Charlie. Yeah, it's that kind of story. While the story has been done before in the original 1984 Firestarter, it's also been done before in various films of this type, especially ones that try to combine horror with the superhero genre. And while some do it well, this one is not one of them. Mainly because at only 1 hour and 34 minutes, it feels like the film is both rushed and plodding when it comes to parts of its plot. There are some parts of its plot that feel dull and incoherent, and others that feel like they're rushed just to get to certain other plot points. On top of that, the Cgi Fire Effects do not work, especially in a 2022 film that's trying to wow the audience with set effects. Even the 80s movie had more convincing fire effects, especially since there were many that used actual fire. And honestly, the after effects for the burns aren't even that particularly impressive either. While Zac Efron and Ryan Kiera Armstrong are clearly trying their hardest when it comes to their acting, the script just doesn't give them anything to work with that isn't just a bunch of generic tropes that we've seen in tons of these movies before. This makes it very hard to care for these characters, even though you can tell the actors are clearly doing the best they can. You can have the best acting in the world, and a bad script will probably make it so that all that effort will be wasted. And while the musical score is genuinely impressive, and it does happen to highlight certain scenes that almost end up being scary or almost end up being exciting if it wasn't for the terrible writing, the ending of the film is probably one of the most underexplained and probably one of the best examples of an ending that feels like it's trying to be clever when it's really just underdeveloped and honestly done without any sense of logic. It really feels like an ending that feels like it was either written by a completely different writer or was written by a writer who just gave up at this point in the story. So, while I don't consider it the worst of the Stephen King adaptations, it's definitely not worth a watch, even if you have a Peacock subscription. And considering how Stephen King felt about the first Firestarter movie, I don't think he'll feel this one will be any better either. While there have been good Stephen King stories, this is unfortunately not one of them, and that's why Firestarter is getting a 4 out of 10. See you next time.